Golden Kamuy has definitely not been a series that's all been about twists and turns around every which corner, but there has been a few noticeable moments throughout its now 3-season run that have been quite shocking and I didn't see coming. This week's episode might be the most shocking reveal yet, because while watching this episode, at no point did I think this was actually a Lieutenant Tsurumi backstory. I figured what this was it was a setup episode. We needed to see a bit more into Kiro's past and what they're ultimately going for. We clearly need to have an understanding of this character who probably is important, or at the very least shapes an ideology and mentality that some like Wilk as well as Kiro clearly have. But watching the episode, while there was a couple of moments that I did predict, like when they're all kind of going gun-ho, shooting every which angle, and we knew that the wife was going to be coming back, I was very fearful that she was going to get shot. In fact, they actually surprised me because there's a moment where I actually out loud said, "Oh no, please don't do this." And it's just a soldier that falls to his death. And I was really relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. They're not killing the baby. They're not killing the wife. And then you pan and you see there's a different body. And I'm like, Golden Kamuy not only made me think this is what's going to happen, they revealed it in such a believable way that it makes you drop your guard to then giving you the inevitable that they were going to die. There's just so much about the backstory that both works for me and also feels a bit dry and boring at certain points, but ultimately this episode left me near speechless and had me pretty damn scared of what was going to happen. I think one of the biggest strengths Golden Kamuy has going for it can also be its biggest weakness or hindrance, and I've seen a decent number of people watch this season of Golden Kamuy saying that it does feel a lot different because we're not with Sugimoto. The groups are very much separated, and I think the amount of characters both work to its favor but also can make it feel like a bit of a drag at certain points. A character like Kiro, as an example, I think is one of the most fascinating and important aspects that this series has. But at the same time, when he's not around very bubbly or interactive and very charismatic personas, his dialogue can feel rather dry, as if it's a stew without a lot of seasoning. But add in a character like Ogata or Asira, it becomes very, very fascinating. But in this episode, it was pretty much him just talking. Not many people had much dialogue outside of the flashback. And this episode, for a while, I'd say honestly the first half, it wasn't that it was bad, it was that I just wasn't that engaged. I was like, this is a backstory that's important, but nothing here is really hooking me in like any of the past 8 episodes that Season 3 has delivered. But by the time we got into the more action-packed stuff, and we ultimately got into the reveal of who this character was, it ties the entire thing together and gives me a different outlook on the episode that if I rewatched it, most likely it wouldn't be nearly as like, oh, I don't feel like this is as important, because clearly it is important, especially considering that this seemingly was the turning point for Tsurumi's character, someone who seemingly was a pretty nice and friendly guy hiding away, and he actually kind of became a psychopathic, amazing character later on. This episode was kind of a mixed bag for me, but it's something that I really do appreciate. The second half of this episode is probably one of the best points of Season 3, with the first half being just really wasn't as gripping for me. But it is such a fascinating episode to see 3 characters who we know either a lot about, we're curious about, or has just been introduced in the case of the female. To have them, go to this guy and start learning a different language and having that Golden Kamuy charm where they don't know what they're saying, or they kind of know what they're saying, like he's talking about fat chicks and, he's talking about, oh, you like the pleasantly plump women. It had some funny moments, it had some cute moments, and it felt like something that obviously was going to implode eventually, but you didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And while watching the episode, when the police come in to search the building, what I figured was happening was that he realized that he was harboring fugitives, so therefore he sent his wife and his child away so they would be safe when the police eventually come. I thought he was turning them in. When I saw that he wasn't turning them in and he was hiding his name, I thought it was because he was very scared of, he was going to get punished for having these people in his home. So when they started beating the police officers and pretty much acting as I expected they would, it was actually pretty shocking to me that the reveal was that they came for him, and I still wasn't piecing 2 and 2 together while watching the episode, and they really did a great job at keeping you on your toes. Honestly, for whatever reason, I was like, what are we getting here? Are we getting an actual Ogata backstory? Are we getting a different character? For whatever reason, Tsurumi just went over my head, and I think it's because we're so used to him with the mask and a really defiled and burnt face. So it's interesting to see how they're really able to twist the formula on its head and give an episode that really was quite different than a majority of Golden Kamuy's episode. And that's something I've always praised about the show, is that it's kind of a jack of all trades. It has a lot of ideas that it can work off of, and a shocking episode like this full of twists and turns that was presented as a pretty dry backstory episode, turned out to be a pretty exhilarating Lieutenant Tsurumi backstory, all things considered. I think the one thing that does have me a little concerned is that with 3 episodes left to go, we know we're about to get a reunion, and that reunion's probably going to be pretty adrenaline pumping. On one hand, I think Sugimoto is going to be a lot more reserved and passive, but then on the other hand, if he has any indication that something bad has happened, he could go complete guerrilla mode. But the thing is I think all of us watching want to see them all together again, even if it's conflict, even if it's them just walking. And I don't know if we're getting that season 4. Even though Golden Kamuy is a pretty popular show in Japan, it does make me feel like this would have been a season better suited for a 2-core run where you had back-to-back, because I feel like Season 4's content is going to really make all the setup and all the wandering and all the, interactions or lack of interactions that we wanted to see really important and fulfilling once you see Season 4. So in some hands, some of these episodes like last week or the comedy episodes or some of the just really engaging backstory episodes, they serve a great purpose, but it feels better as a core that is happening before you get to the next one back to back. That is just obviously my personal preference, and I hope people don't take this as me shitting on Golden Kamuy. I mean, you can look back at all the reviews. I've pretty much nothing but praised Golden Kamuy. The most I've ever really criticized is production, I think. I mean, there's been a couple of hiccups with pacing. So this isn't me saying I hate this episode or I hate Golden Kamuy. It's just, by the time we're reaching the conclusion of this season, I'm starting to notice some things that I wish were a bit different, and that is I think sometimes because of how many characters we have, I wouldn't remove any of the characters, but because of how many we have, it sometimes takes away from other aspects that I want to see more of. And the fact that we're so separated with them, it feels like by the time we do get that reunion, the season's going to be over, and hopefully they'll immediately confirm a season 4 so we can get that confirmation and just know that all this setup isn't just going to be leaving us off. Because season 2, despite it having a pretty big cliffhanger, I think was a great stopping point, all things considered, to jump into the manga, where here we're about to jump into some insanity, so hopefully either the remaining few episodes will be very action-packed, very adrenaline-pumping, emotionally engaging, or we get that season 4 announcement, or all the above. Either way though, this wasn't my favorite episode of the season. It was definitely lower on the bar, at least for myself, but in terms of shock and awe factor, definitely up there for best Golden Kamuy moments, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with episodes 10 through 12 in the coming weeks. I think one of the biggest questions I have for going into next week's episode is, are they going to continue off of this backstory, or are they going to jump right back into modern day? I wouldn't be opposed to starting next week's episode off from Lieutenant Tsurumi's point of view and maybe even flashing back and seeing it from his point of view with his internal monologue. I think there's a lot of opportunities to really extend what we've seen. If they don't and they just continue back with modern day, I don't think that'd be an issue, but I think there's a lot of potential if they wanted to flesh it out even further now that we know who this character is, and maybe see what his madness did after losing everything and having to start anew by the looks of it. Enjoyable episode. I wouldn't say it was an amazing episode. It was a solid episode for me overall, and I'm still just as excited for more Golden Kamuy as I always am. Let me know your thoughts and feelings, and definitely your theories down below on where you think it might go next week, especially considering that they have a pretty risky but solid plan on crossing the ocean, but I kind of feel like the cracks are going to start happening as they walk, and someone might end up dead or something to that nature. Let me know whatever you're feeling, of course. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.